Hello, everyone. My name is Derek, and along with my partners Samuel, Min, and Tao of Group 40, we did our paper review on paper 45 titled Adaptive Caches as a Defense Mechanism Against Cache Side Channel Attacks. And this paper was written by Sahan Bandara and Michelle A. Kinsey.
So the background is the cache side-channel attacks. Due to their ability to collect sensitive information from the computer system, they can steal cryptographic keys, spy on input devices, and violate system security measures. To defend against these attacks, there are two contributions. One is the software-based defenses that modify the software application to minimize the amount of information that is leaked. They also restrict access to high-resolution timers and cache burst instructions. However, these modifications have a negative impact on performance. The other contribution is hardware-based defenses. The partition lock cache allows the process to lock cache lines and create a private partition inside the cache. The random permutation cache uses a permutation table to store an alternate mapping of the index bits to cache sets. What these two defenses do is limit the attacker's ability to collect information from the victim. The downfall, however, is that they are expensive and difficult to implement. So the proposed method is the adaptive caches, also called runtime reconfigurable caches. It uses noise to prevent attackers from getting accurate information, and it happens when a potential attack is detected or at random time intervals. Some of the findings we found are its effectiveness by the number of configurations. What this means is that a cache with a small number of configurations can be easily worked around by the attacker, so a higher number of configurations can make it more difficult and time-consuming. The other one is the cache parameters. If one cache parameter is changed, such as the associativity or line width, the accuracy of the attack is affected, but it can still be enough by allocating resources. So with that said, two or more changes of the cache parameters can reduce the attack's impact.
This paper had many strong elements, and one that stood out was its readability and format. To put it simply, the words used in the paper were not too difficult to understand and interpret, and words that were unfamiliar were defined. As far as organization goes, the paper is broken up into multiple sections, including the abstract, introduction, experiments, and results. The experimental procedure that the paper documents is also laid out clearly. Another strength of this paper was the thoroughness of the author's analysis of adaptive caches and their viability. For example, the paper establishes a baseline for their experiment, as shown in Figure 3 on the right. This is the situation where the attacker is aware of the cache's configuration, and there are no runtime configurations put into place. A baseline scenario for testing helps increase the validity of the paper's experiments and eliminates possible outliers. The paper also tests different cache variables or parameters, including associativity, cache sets, and line width. An example of one of these experiments is shown in Figure 13, where two parameters are reconfigured. I consider this a strong point as well, since these different experiments help support the effectiveness of adaptive caches and also helps reinforce the paper's conclusion of early attack detection.
When it comes to the weaknesses of this paper, there only appear to be a few issues. One such issue pertains to giving a clear comparison of the performance benefit provided by use of runtime reconfigurable caches versus previous defense mechanisms. The authors of the study merely mentioned the potential negative performance aspects of the previous defense mechanisms, but never quantified them. Thus, the analysis at points to be vague and indicate a possible bias towards their own findings on adaptive caches as a means of defense against cache side channel attacks. Another weakness in the paper is the authors being convoluted in some of their explanations. For example, they go into too specific of detail about a certain aspect only to restate it in another matter as a means for better understanding. The paper would benefit from omitting the convoluted explanations and sticking to the simpler explanations they would provide.
After reading this paper, we arose with a couple of questions. One being around the optimal role of adaptive caches when it comes to being a defense mechanism against cache side channel attacks. We want to ask the authors what they believe to be the best complementary defense mechanism to be used alongside adaptive caches. Additionally, for future research, how can the rate of false positive attacks be reduced, and how would this reduction impact the use of adaptive caches as a defense mechanism? Would it make adaptive caches more viable or less viable? Overall, this research paper provides the positives and negatives of using adaptive caches when it comes to fending off against cache side channel attacks. The positives being that adaptive caches have a low performance overhead in comparison to previous defenses. In addition, adaptive caches can significantly reduce the accuracy of probe and prime attacks, as well as avoid the termination of applications on a computer when defending against a cache side channel attack. Furthermore, adaptive caches can complement other defense mechanisms like the hardware and software defenses listed in the paper. This means that adaptive caches can be used to bridge the gap that exists between security and performance. However, using adaptive caches as a defense still has some negatives. For example, swift detection of an attack is paramount in succeeding against the attack. Also, using adaptive caches as your sole mechanism of defense does not guarantee that an attack will be defended against, unlike other defenses that terminate the applications.